The door closes behind you, not with a sound meant to alarm, not with urgency, just enough to tell the others that this moment no longer belongs to them. The room feels warmer than the corridor outside. The air holds the quiet heaviness of bodies that have been waiting too long. A candle trembles once, then steadies. In your hands, the newborn shifts. A small movement, a soft, uncertain breath. You lower yourself onto the wooden stool beside the bed. Your knees know this position well. Your body settles without thought. This is the moment no one ever witnesses. You place the child across your lap. The weight is slight, almost unreal. You adjust the cloth, careful not to startle. From the pocket of your apron, you take out a folded piece of fabric. It is worn, thin at the edges, soft from years of being handled. When you unfold it, a faint scent rises into the warm air. Dry, green, barely there. You warm the cloth between your palms, slowly, as if the warmth must come from you first. And then, with the same unhurried motion you have used for decades, you touch the soles of the baby's feet. The heels first. Always the heels. Your thumbs move in small, steady circles. Gentle pressure. Patient rhythm. No one has ever asked why. They never stay in the room long enough to see. Much earlier that night, long before the door closed, long before the child was placed in your arms, you were asleep, or close enough to it. Your body recognizes the sound before your thoughts do. A knock, not sharp, not frantic. Measured, careful. You open your eyes in the dark. The room is still. The night holds its breath. You do not rush. You never rush. You sit up slowly, letting the weight of your years settle into place. Your feet touch the cold stone floor. The chill is familiar, almost comforting. You already know who is standing outside. They always come after midnight. You dress without thinking. The same wool wrap. The same boots softened by use. The same apron folded and refolded so many times that your hands know every crease. Before you reach for the door, you pause. You always pause here. Your fingers find the small pouch hanging beside your bed. It is light now, much lighter than it once was. You do not open it. You do not check its contents. There is no need. Your hands remember what your eyes no longer need to see. The door opens to the night. Cold air brushes your face. The village lies low and silent, its shapes softened by darkness. Only one window burns with light. Far ahead, you step outside and close the door behind you. Your pace is slow, unhurried. There is no danger in delay. By the time they come for you, the waiting has already begun. You have walked this path countless times, in rain, in frost, in nights so quiet they felt unreal. Your boots find the familiar uneven stones. Your breath clouds briefly in front of you, then disappears. You listen as you walk, not for sounds of alarm, but for the deeper rhythm beneath them. The night tells you everything you need to know. People trust you. They trust your silence, your steady presence. the way you never ask questions that do not need answers. In these times, not every child is promised a long life. Everyone knows this, though no one speaks of it openly. Hope is kept quiet, like a fragile thing that might break if named too loudly. And in this village, hope has learned to follow you home. The house is already awake when you arrive. Women move aside to make space. Someone presses a cloth into your hands. Someone else looks away. You nod once. You always nod. There is no need for reassurance yet. You wash your hands once, then again. Warm water, steam rising. You let the warmth linger. You take your time. Inside the room, the air is thick with waiting. Breath, murmured words. The quiet tension of people trying not to interfere. You listen, not only with your ears, but with the part of you that has learned to read rooms like this. The subtle change that tells you when to move and when to wait. Time stretches. Minutes lose their shape. You act when needed. You wait when waiting is better. There is no hurry now. There is only attention. When the child finally arrives, you do not smile. Not yet. You watch. You listen. You wait for the room to exhale. Only then do you lift the newborn into your arms. Later, after the bed has been cleaned, after the voices have softened, after someone suggests rest, that is when you speak. Just a moment. Your voice is gentle, certain. They hesitate. They always do. And then they leave. The door closes. You are alone now. Just you and the child. The candle casts a small circle of light. The rest of the room fades into shadow. You sit. You breathe. You reach into your apron. Your great-grandmother taught you this, not with explanations, never with names. She showed you once, then again. Her hands were thin, steady. She never told you what the herbs were called. She never told you why they mattered. Watch, she said. Remember? That was enough. You warm the cloth between your palms. You wait. And when the baby stirs, you begin. The heels first. Always the heels. Your touch is slow, circular, almost thoughtless in its repetition. The room is quiet enough to hear breathing. Yours, the child's. You do not rush. You never rush this part. Some say it is luck. Some whisper about the herbs. Others say nothing at all, only that the children born with your hands nearby tend to grow. They learn to stand. They survive winters. They stay. You finish the motion the same way every time. One last press, gentle, certain. You fold the cloth again, return it to its place. The moment passes. It always does. When you open the door, the world returns. Voices, movement, relief. You step back. Your work is done. Before dawn, you leave. The path home is quiet. The air feels lighter somehow. You do not look back. There will be another knock, another night. There always is. But tonight, you are not walking through a dark village. You are not listening for hurried footsteps. You are not holding a fragile life in your hands. You are warm. You are safe. Your night is quiet, and nothing is being asked of you except to rest. So let your breathing slow. Let the world soften. The secret has been kept. The door is closed, and you can finally sleep. The door closes behind you with a sound that isn't loud, but final. Wood settling into wood. A latch finding its place. And for a moment, the cottage feels smaller than it looked from outside. Not cramped exactly, but contained. A space where the rules are already in the air, even if no one speaks them. The midwife does not introduce herself. Not with a name. Not with a smile. She doesn't need to. In villages like this, a midwife is not a stranger. She is a function, a necessity. The person people go to when the night turns sharp and something inside the body begins to move in ways no one can control. You are standing just inside the threshold, your cloak still damp at the hem, your boots leaving faint prints of road dust on the hard-packed floor. The room smells of dried herbs and old smoke, something bitter, something sweet, something like time crushed between fingers. And underneath it all, the stubborn smell of boiled linen, the smell of clean cloth that has been boiled too many times. The midwife gestures, not dramatically, just a small motion of her hand, as if she is moving you into place, the way she might move a chair. You sit. There is a low table by the wall, a bench near the hearth, a shelf lined with small earthen jars, each sealed with wax or cloth tied tight with twine, a hanging bunch of something dried, lavender, maybe, or something darker and sharper. Nothing looks wealthy, but everything looks deliberate. On the hearth, there is no roaring fire, only coals, banked carefully. Heat kept, not wasted. Outside, the wind continues, pressing at the shutters with a soft insistence, like a hand testing if you are truly inside. You are not here by accident. The midwife moves with quiet certainty. Her hands are not delicate, but they are steady. She has the kind of stillness that comes from doing the same work for years. The kind of stillness that makes even other people's fear quieter. She crosses to the shelf, lifts one jar, then another. She does not open them. She simply checks the seals with her thumb. 1, 2, 3, as if the seals themselves are a language. Then she kneels near a chest by the wall, opens it, and pulls out folded cloths. Linen. White once, now soft and worn. The cloth of practical things. She lays them on the table in a stack. You watch because there is nothing else to do, and because, in a house like this, watching is part of being allowed to be here. A moment later, she brings water, warm, not hot, in a shallow bowl that has been scrubbed so often it looks lighter where the hands have touched it. She sets it down, then finally speaks. Wait. One word, not unkind, not cold, just final. You wait. The midwife steps toward the back room. A curtain divides the cottage, not a door, a thick cloth hanging like a boundary. She pauses at that curtain, listening. You listen too. At first you hear nothing, then a sound that isn't loud, but unmistakable. A breath that is working harder than it should. A low, strained exhale. A pause. Then another. Someone is in there. Not asleep, not resting. Working. The midwife pulls the curtain aside and disappears. For a minute, the cottage feels emptier, even though the air is still full of her. The jars, the cloth, the coals, the smell of herbs. Your eyes drift again to the shelf. There are many jars, some marked with charcoal, some with little scratches on the clay, some with nothing at all. You can't read them, but you can sense the difference between a jar that holds harmless things and a jar that holds something people do not talk about. In the medieval world, medicine did not live in books for most people. It lived in hands, in mouths, in old women's memory, in the way a plant smelled when it was crushed, in the way a tea tasted before it turned your stomach, in the way certain leaves could calm a fever or turn their own kind of color if used too much. A midwife was not only someone who helped babies arrive, she was, in many villages, the closest thing to a healer. And healers were always watched because people wanted them and feared them. You can hear it now, faintly, beneath the wind, the village's suspicion, invisible but present. A woman with herbs. A woman who knows how bodies change. A woman who knows secrets. And tonight, you have walked into one of those secrets without meaning to. Inside the back room, the breathing changes. The midwife speaks softly, not clearly enough to catch the words, but the tone is steady, anchoring. Another breath, then another. Then the sound of water again, a cloth being dipped and wrung out. You sit still on the bench, hands resting on your knees, trying to take up as little space as possible. You do not want to become a problem. In this era, a visitor is always a question. And in a house where something urgent is happening, questions are not welcomed unless they are useful. Time moves differently here. Outside, the wind continues its slow, repetitive testing. Inside, the coals glow faintly. A jar settles slightly on the shelf. Wood creaks. And then you hear a sound that makes your attention sharpen. A small cry. Not loud, not sharp, but real. The sound of a tiny life arriving into air. A pause. Then another sound. A different cry. Stronger now. More sure. Then quieter. As if someone has gathered the baby close. You realize you have been holding your breath. You let it out slowly. The midwife returns. She does not look triumphant. She does not look relieved. She looks normal, which is its own kind of unnerving, because for her, this is normal. She reaches for a cloth, wipes her hands carefully, then wipes them again. Her hands are clean, but the ritual matters. She sets the cloth aside. Then she does something you don't expect. She looks at you, not like a host checking if you are comfortable, not like someone making conversation, like someone deciding whether you are safe enough to remain. Your spine becomes straighter without you choosing it. The midwife's gaze is calm, but it is direct. Then, without explanation, she gestures again, this time toward the table. "Sit closer," she says. You move. The bench scrapes softly. The midwife opens one of the jars. Not the ones with neat marks, not the ones with obvious scratches. A smaller jar, tucked behind another, half-shadowed. When she lifts the lid, the smell changes immediately. It is not unpleasant, but it is stronger. A deep green smell, sharp, earthy, something like crushed leaves and damp soil. She dips her finger into it. It is not liquid, not a salve like fat or oil. It is a paste, thick. She rubs it between her fingers once, testing. Then she closes the jar again, tight, like a promise. You think, for a moment, she might explain, but she doesn't. Instead, she gathers another cloth and turns toward the curtain. She pauses again, and then, quietly, she says something that lands in you like a stone dropping into water. No one follows. You blink. She doesn't repeat herself, but the meaning is clear. The back room is not yours. It is not even hers. In a way, it belongs to the work, to the mother, to the child, to whatever rituals she keeps alive in her hands. She disappears behind the curtain again, carrying the jar and the cloth. You sit frozen, because now the thing that began as an ordinary night, a midwife called to do her job, has shifted into something else. A boundary has been drawn, and you have been told, gently but firmly, that the boundary exists for a reason. The village knows her. The village calls her. The village trusts her just enough, but it does not know what she does in those minutes when she closes herself in with the newborn. That part is not for them. It is for her. And the secret has weight, because in a time when infant survival is uncertain, when people accept losses with a quiet resignation that would horrify a modern mind, patterns become legend. If children born under one midwife grow stronger, if fewer graves are dug, if fewer small funerals happen quietly before dawn, people notice. They may not say it out loud. They watch, they whisper, they look for explanations, and when they cannot find one, they invent their own. In some villages, the invention is kind. She has blessed hands. In others, it is not. She has made a bargain. Or she knows something she won't share. The midwife is gone longer this time, not hours, just minutes. But the minutes stretch. You stare at the fire. You watch the coals pulse softly. You listen to the wind and the faint sounds from behind the curtain. Soft murmurs, a cloth being moved, the smallest, almost imperceptible whimper that fades quickly, soothed. Then silence, and then a sound that should not be loud, but feels loud because the room is so quiet. A small, tight click, like a jar being opened and closed again. The midwife returns. Her hands are clean, too clean, not freshly washed clean, wiped clean. as if whatever she touched was meant to leave no trace. She sets the cloth down, folds it, and places it inside the chest. Then she sits opposite you. For a moment, she says nothing. And in that silence, you understand something you did not expect to understand. The secret is not only the pace, it is the behavior, the discipline, the decision that the ritual must remain consistent. Every time, the same. No deviations, no witnesses. If the ritual is what keeps children thriving, then the ritual must be protected more than comfort, more than friendliness, more than social ease. The midwife's voice is quiet when she finally speaks. "My grandmother taught me," she says. "Not my mother, not a woman in town, my grandmother. A lineage, a chain, a knowledge that traveled mouth to ear, hand to hand, over decades. You do not ask questions. You know better. But she speaks anyway, as if she has chosen to let the words fall, because the room is safe enough." She said, the midwife continues, that there are places in the body where life holds on. Her eyes flick toward the curtain. "The feet," she says. Then she stops again. The air tightens. The midwife's gaze stays steady, but there is something in it that suggests she is not only talking about medicine, she is talking about faith, about superstition, about the old world still living under the new. In medieval villages, faith was layered. Church prayers in the morning, old charms at night, crosses above doors, salt at thresholds, herbs hung from rafters. People lived in both worlds at once. They didn't call it contradiction. They called it survival. The midwife does not say magic. She does not say witchcraft. She is too careful for that. She chooses words that can live safely in daylight. Protection, she says instead. A small thing, a small place. Your eyes drop automatically to your own boots, and in your mind, a picture forms. A newborn, tiny feet, soft heels, a woman's thumb, a green paste, a few minutes behind a curtain while the village waits outside, pretending not to wonder. The midwife's face remains calm, but her fingers, as they rest on the edge of the table, press lightly into the wood, a sign of tension, not fear. Caution. She is not afraid of what she does. She is afraid of what people would call it, because names have power here. A midwife can be revered, and a midwife can be ruined, sometimes by the same people. If a harvest fails, they might look for a reason. If a cow dies, they might look for a cause. If a woman bleeds too much after birth, they might look for someone to blame, and the woman with jars of herbs is always visible. So she keeps her most important work hidden behind cloth. She says nothing more about the paste. Instead, she stands, returns to the hearth, and stirs the coals. She adds one small piece of wood, not enough to blaze, enough to keep warmth. The cottage becomes steadily quieter. The work is done. In the back room, the mother breathes in a slow, exhausted rhythm. The newborn has stopped crying. There is no celebration, only the heavy, plain relief of survival. The midwife pours water into a cup, drinks, then pours another cup and sets it near you, not as hospitality, as instruction. Drink. Be steady. Be quiet. Take what is offered. You sip. The water is warm and tastes faintly of clay. Then the midwife speaks again, and the words are almost casual. You will sleep here. You look up. She gestures toward the bench near the hearth, not close enough to be warm like family, not far enough to be useless. A guest position, a safe position, a place where you can be seen if you move. She does not say it, but you understand it. In homes where secrets exist, guests sleep within sight. You lie down when she motions you to. The wool blanket she gives you is rough but clean. The hearth heat touches your face gently, like a hand that does not linger. The wind outside continues. The village sleeps, and in the back room, behind cloth, a child is alive. You close your eyes, but your mind stays awake longer than it should, because now you are holding something that feels dangerous simply by knowing it. Not the exact recipe, not the names of the herbs, but the pattern. The fact that there is a pattern at all. And as your breathing slows, one thought repeats, soft and persistent, like the wind against the shutters. If the village knew what she did, would they thank her for it? Or would they fear her? The coals pulse. The room settles. Sleep begins to wrap around you slowly, like linen laid over a body. And before you fully drift, you hear the midwife moving again in the dark, not toward the back room, toward the shelf. A soft scrape, a jar shifting, then silence. As if even in rest, she is checking the seals. 1, 2, 3, making sure the secret remains closed. And somewhere beyond the curtain, the newborn breathes quietly, feet warm, heels faintly scented with something green and ancient, held in place by a ritual older than anyone living in this cottage now. You finally let yourself drift, not into a deep sleep yet, just into the edge of it, where sounds soften, where the wind becomes a steady hush, where the secret remains what it is. Not a story to be told loudly, but a quiet, careful thing done in the dark to keep life holding on. You wake before dawn, not because of noise, but because the cottage itself shifts. Wood contracting as the night cools. A change in the air that tells your body it is nearly morning. The bench beneath you is hard, but your limbs are warm enough, and that feels like a small victory in a world where comfort is never guaranteed. The midwife is already awake. She moves quietly near the hearth, adjusting the coals, restoring the careful balance between heat and restraint. Nothing in her movements suggests urgency. If there is another knock tonight, she will be ready. If there is not, she will still be ready. This, you realize, is part of what makes people trust her. She does not react. She prepares. When she notices you are awake, she nods once. No questions, no commentary. She pours you water again, warm and faintly mineral, and sets a small piece of bread beside it. Not fresh bread, yesterday's. Firm at the edges, meant to be eaten slowly. You take it because that is what is done. Refusing would draw attention, and attention is not something you want in a house like this. The back room is quiet now. The mother sleeps. The child breathes. The midwife does not check on them immediately. She waits. She lets the night finish leaving before she interferes again. This patience seems deliberate, almost ritualized, as if there are rules you cannot see, but she follows precisely. When she finally parts the curtain, she does so without ceremony. She looks, listens, adjusts a blanket, nothing more. Whatever mattered most happened while the door was closed, while the jar was opened and sealed again. Everything after that is maintenance. You leave the cottage as the sky begins to pale. There is no farewell, no gratitude spoken aloud. In the medieval world, gratitude is often implied by survival alone. You step back onto the path, and the village still sleeps, unaware of how close it came to something else. It is only later, days later, that you begin to notice the pattern. You hear it first as coincidence, a comment here, a remark there, someone mentioning that the child born at the cooper's house is strong, that the baby from the edge of the fields cries less than expected, that winter has been unkind, that somehow the youngest have endured. No one attributes it directly to the midwife, not openly. That would be dangerous. Instead, people say things like, "She has good hands," or "She is careful," or simply, "We were lucky." Luck is a word people use when they sense order, but do not want to name it. You see the midwife again the following week, then again after that. Always at night, always after midnight. The knocks come in different rhythms, from different houses, but the sequence that follows never truly changes. She dresses. She pauses. She checks the pouch by her bed without opening it. She walks the familiar paths with the same unhurried steps. Each house feels different at first. Some are smaller, more crowded. Some are cleaner, others thick with the smell of animals and smoke. But once the door closes and the work begins, those differences fade. The ritual takes over. Water warmed, cloth prepared, jars checked, hands washed, waiting, and always, eventually, the same request. Just a moment. Always said gently, always obeyed. You are present for 3 more nights like this, enough for the pattern to stop feeling accidental and begin to feel intentional. Enough for you to understand that what happens behind the closed door is not improvised. It is not adjusted based on mood or circumstance. It is exact. You begin to notice details you missed before. How she always uses the same cloth for the ritual, never a new one. How she never applies the paste with her fingertips directly, but always through fabric. How she never allows the newborn's feet to grow cold before she begins. How the jar is opened and closed with the same small click every time, as if the sound itself matters. Once you catch a glimpse of the paste in better light, it is darker than you expected, more brown than green now, dried by years of exposure. It smells less like a single herb and more like something layered, something built over time. You wonder if the original mixture even exists anymore, or if what she uses now is a descendant of it, changed slowly with each passing year. You never ask. The midwife never offers. In villages like these, knowledge survives precisely because it is not explained. On the fourth night, as you walk with her toward another house, you finally hear her speak without being prompted by necessity. The road is quiet, frost biting at the edges of the earth, and your breath rises in small white clouds. She does not look at you when she talks. My grandmother said some things should never be improved, she says, only repeated. You understand that she is not talking about herbs. She is talking about restraint, about knowing when to stop asking why, about trusting the shape of something old enough to have outlived its creators. You think of the jar, of the way she checks the seals even when no one is watching, of the way she never deviates, even when circumstances change. You begin to see the ritual not as superstition, but as a defense against error. If nothing changes, nothing goes wrong. In a world where so much is uncertain, certainty itself becomes medicine. That night's house is larger. The people inside speak more, worry more, move more. The midwife's presence quiets them slowly, like water poured over embers. The birth is longer, the waiting stretches. But when the time comes, the sequence remains intact. The door closes. The jar opens. The heels are warmed and pressed and rubbed in careful circles. When she emerges, her expression is unchanged, calm, neutral, contained. Later, as you sit near the hearth again, she speaks once more, her voice low. People think it is about what I use, she says. They are wrong. She does not elaborate. She does not need to. You already understand. It is not the herbs alone. It is the time, the touch, the consistency, the refusal to rush, the belief that life, at its smallest, responds not to force, but to attention. Outside, winter tightens its grip. Food grows scarcer. Illness moves quietly through homes, but the children born under her watch continue to live, and that fact becomes impossible to ignore. You feel the village shifting around her, trust deepening into dependence. Dependence flirting with fear, because in the medieval world, anyone who alters outcomes becomes a potential threat. And the midwife knows this. That is why the door always closes. That is why the ritual remains hidden. That is why the jar is checked, sealed, and returned to its place every single time. Not because she doubts it, but because she understands how fragile protection can be once it is named. By the time a full month has passed, the pattern is no longer invisible. You notice it first in the way people speak around the midwife, not directly to her and not openly about her, but around her presence, as if the space she occupies has shifted slightly, forcing conversations to bend. People lower their voices when she passes They pause, then continue as if nothing has happened. They watch her walk away before finishing a sentence. In the medieval world, silence is often more revealing than speech, and this silence is new. The midwife notices it too. You can tell by the way she no longer lingers in doorways, no longer accepts even brief conversation after a night's work. She arrives. She does what must be done. She leaves before dawn, always alone, always unremarked upon aloud. The births continue. Some nights are quiet, almost ordinary. Others stretch long into the dark hours, filled with waiting and restrained anxiety. The houses change, but the ritual does not. The midwife's movements remain precise, unaltered by circumstance. Water is warmed to the same temperature. Cloth is folded the same way. The jar is removed from the shelf, opened briefly, closed with care, returned to its place. Always the same sequence, always the door closed. You begin to understand that repetition is not only for the child, it is for her. A structure strong enough to hold against fear, doubt, and the slow pressure of other people's expectations. In one house near the edge of the village, the air smells strongly of animals and damp straw. The floor is uneven, the walls dark with smoke. The family is poor, anxious, visibly tense. The midwife treats this house no differently than the others. She does not hurry. She does not soften her voice. She does not alter the ritual to fit their panic. When the child arrives safely, the relief in the room is nearly overwhelming. Gratitude spills out in ways it never does in wealthier homes. Someone reaches for the midwife's hands without thinking. She withdraws, gently but firmly, creating distance without insult. Later, outside, you hear a woman whisper, "She never fails." The words are not meant for you. They are spoken into the cold air, like a prayer or a warning. Statements like that do not pass unnoticed. In medieval villages, absolutes are dangerous. To say someone never fails is to invite scrutiny, resentment, and expectation all at once. The midwife knows this. That night, as you walk back through narrow streets dusted with frost, she speaks without looking at you. "They will start counting," she says. You know what she means. Counting births, counting survivors, counting winters past without small graves appearing too often at the edge of the churchyard. Numbers turn patterns into accusations. The next few nights confirm it. People linger longer after the work is done. They ask questions framed as concern. They offer gifts that are unnecessary and therefore suspicious. A loaf of bread, a piece of cloth, a small coin pressed into her hand with too much insistence. She accepts nothing she has not always accepted. Consistency is her shield. But shields draw attention. You begin to notice how often her name appears in conversations that stop abruptly when she enters a room. How often she is mentioned in connection with words like fortune and favor. How often someone crosses themselves after speaking of her, as if instinctively balancing admiration with caution. The medieval world does not separate healing from belief. Everything that alters the natural order, even gently, must be explained within a moral framework. If children survive more often in one set of hands, then something beyond chance must be responsible. And if something beyond chance exists, then it must be controlled. The midwife never addresses this directly. She responds to suspicion the same way she responds to fear, by narrowing her focus. She shortens her visits. She avoids unnecessary contact. She keeps her tools close, her movements economical, her words few. The ritual becomes even more exact. You notice how she now checks the jar twice before opening it, once before and once after. How she keeps the cloth folded inside another cloth, creating layers that protect it from air and light. How she warms the newborn's feet longer than before, ensuring no chill interferes. It is not escalation. It is preservation. One night, as you wait near the hearth while the midwife is behind the curtain, you hear raised voices outside the house. Not shouting, but sharp, urgent speech. The kind that carries tension even when restrained. The midwife does not emerge. The ritual continues uninterrupted. When she finally opens the door, her expression is unchanged. Outside, the voices fade. Whatever question was forming dissolves in the presence of a living child. Survival silences doubt, at least temporarily. Later, as you walk back under a sky heavy with cloud, the midwife speaks again. They will ask me to explain, she says. Soon. You say nothing. There is nothing to say. Explanation would require words. Words would require definitions. Definitions would require judgment. Her knowledge cannot survive that process intact. In the days that follow, you observe something subtle but important. Other women begin to imitate small pieces of her behavior. They warm cloths before touching newborns. They press gently at tiny feet without understanding why. They repeat gestures stripped of context, hoping repetition alone will bring results. It does not. Without the full ritual, without the timing, without the discipline of sameness, the gestures become meaningless. The midwife watches this quietly, never correcting them, never intervening. Knowledge shared incorrectly can be more dangerous than knowledge withheld. At night, when the houses fall silent and the roads empty, she continues as she always has. The jar remains hidden. The door remains closed. The ritual remains intact. You realize then that the true secret is not the herbs or even the touch. It is her refusal to let the village claim ownership over the outcome. She does not promise. She does not advertise. She does not allow her work to become spectacle. She keeps it small, private, repetitive. Because in a world where fear travels faster than reason, the safest power is the one that refuses to announce itself. By the end of the month, the midwife is both essential and isolated, needed and watched, trusted and whispered about. And still, the children live. Still, the jar is opened and closed. Still, the door shuts quietly. Cutting the ritual off from the world beyond it, you begin to understand that the midwife's greatest skill is not healing, but containment. Holding the work within limits strict enough to protect it from the very people it serves. As winter presses closer and nights lengthen, the pressure around her tightens. The village waits for something to change, for a failure, for a sign. The midwife waits too, not for failure, for endurance. Winter settles fully now, not with drama, but with weight. Snow does not fall often, but the cold remains, pressing into walls, into joints, into breath. The village moves more slowly. People speak less at night. Doors close earlier. The midwife's work does not slow. If anything, it becomes more frequent. Cold months do not forgive weakness, especially in the very young. You begin to notice how carefully she measures her own body now. She eats enough, but no more than necessary. She sleeps when she can, never deeply, never long. Her movements are still precise, but there is a faint heaviness beneath them, the accumulation of nights without rest. She does not complain. Complaining would waste energy. One night, the knock comes later than usual. The moon is high, pale, and the air is brittle with frost. The midwife pauses before answering, not from reluctance, but calculation. She adjusts the strap of her pouch, checks the jar once more without opening it, then opens the door. The house is farther than the others, beyond the clustered cottages, closer to the fields where the wind cuts without obstruction. The walk is longer. Your toes numb before you arrive. Inside, the room is poorly heated, the hearth barely alive. The mother is young, frightened, already exhausted. The midwife says nothing unnecessary. She sets the ritual in motion, as she always does. This birth is harder. The waiting stretches. The mother's breathing phrase. The room grows tense with fear that does not know where to go. You feel it building, pressing against the midwife's silence, testing it. Still, she does not alter her pace. She does not rush the body that is already working beyond its limits. When the child finally arrives, there is a moment, brief, dangerous, where the room holds its breath. Then the sound comes, weak at first, then stronger. Relief floods the space so fast it feels dizzying. The midwife closes the door behind her with the child. The ritual takes longer this time. You sit by the hearth, listening to the wind scrape along the walls. Minutes pass, then more. The villagers outside wait in rigid silence, pretending patience while fear coils in their chests. No one speaks. No one knocks. Even curiosity knows better than to interrupt now. When the midwife returns, her face is paler than usual. She does not sit immediately. She cleans her hands slowly, deliberately, as if grounding herself in the repetition. Only then does she lower herself onto the bench. For the first time since you have known her, she exhales deeply. Not relief, release. The body remembered, she says quietly. You know she is not talking about the mother. She is talking about herself. That night, after you return to the cottage, you do not sleep immediately. You watch the midwife prepare the jar for storage with more care than usual. She replaces the cloth that wraps it, folding it along lines so old they seem permanent. Her hands move automatically, but her eyes stay on the jar longer than before. You won't teach it, you say. Not as a question. She does not look up. No, she answers. There is no hesitation, no regret. She continues working, her fingers steady. My grandmother told me once, she says, that some knowledge survives only because it ends. You absorb that slowly, in a world obsessed with inheritance, land, name, trade. This refusal feels almost unnatural. But the midwife is not speaking about legacy as others understand it. She is speaking about containment again, about choosing disappearance over distortion. If I teach it, she continues, it will change. If it changes, it will be tested. If it is tested, it will be named. She tightens the cloth. And if it is named, it will not survive. You understand then that the ritual is not fragile because it is secret. It is secret because it is fragile. It cannot endure scrutiny, interpretation, improvement. It survives only in repetition, in silence, in one pair of hands at a time. The nights that follow confirm her choice. Questions begin to surface more openly now. Not accusations, but requests framed as admiration. People ask if she might show them how she prepares the cloth, how she warms the water, how she knows when to close the door. They ask gently, smiling, as if politeness will soften the boundary. She refuses without offense. That part is not mine to give, she says. Some accept this, others do not. You hear murmurs of frustration, of envy, of suspicion disguised as concern. In medieval villages, control often hides behind community. What cannot be shared becomes threatening. The midwife responds by narrowing her world further. She stops accepting apprentices entirely. She no longer allows anyone to assist her, not even in small tasks. She carries her own water, folds her own cloth, walks alone whenever possible. The jar never leaves her sight. Her body grows thinner, her movements slower, but the ritual remains unchanged. One night, as you walk back beneath a sky heavy with snow, she stumbles slightly, just enough for you to notice. She steadies herself without comment and keeps walking. You say nothing. Acknowledgement would break the illusion of control she relies on. Still, something has shifted. You realize that the midwife's greatest risk is no longer the village. It is time. Bodies wear down, hands stiffen, memory blurs at the edges. Repetition can preserve knowledge, but it cannot preserve flesh. She knows this too. Later that week, after another successful birth, she sits longer than usual by the hearth. Her gaze drifts not to the fire, but to the shelf where the jar rests. There is something like calculation in her eyes, not fear, not sadness. Assessment. How long? You ask quietly. She considers the question. Long enough, she says. Not forever. Forever has never been an option here. In the medieval world, survival is measured in seasons, not lifetimes. The midwife understands this better than anyone. Her work has always been about buying time, not conquering death. As winter deepens, the pressure around her eases slightly. Too many children have lived. Too many fears have been quieted. The village settles into cautious acceptance again. People stop asking. They stop watching as closely. The midwife does not relax. She has never confused silence with safety. The jar remains sealed. The door remains closed. The ritual continues, night after night, unchanged. And you begin to sense that this cannot last. Not because it will fail, but because everything that depends on one body, one mind, one unbroken chain, must eventually choose how it ends. The midwife has already chosen. She will not pass the secret on. She will let it fade with her, intact, unnamed, unclaimed. And in doing so, she protects it from becoming something the world would destroy. You sit with this understanding as snow finally begins to fall, soft and persistent, covering paths, roofs, footprints. The village sleeps beneath it, unaware of how much has already been decided. Behind closed doors, children breathe quietly. The jar rests on its shelf, and the knowledge remains exactly where it has always been. Held, repeated, and deliberately unfinished. Snow keeps falling in thin, patient layers, smoothing the village into something quieter. Roof lines soften, footpaths vanish, the world becomes muffled, as if the whole countryside has agreed to speak lower. In weather like this, people stay close to their hearths and hope their bodies behave. But bodies do not obey hope. They obey hunger, cold, fear, and whatever old rules live deep inside them. The midwife's door is knocked on more often now. Sometimes, twice in the same night, a message passed hand to hand, a whisper delivered quickly, then swallowed by the wind. She does not ask for details. At the threshold, she only nods, gathers her pouch, wraps her cloak, checks the small jar by touch, as if confirming it is real, and steps out into the dark. You begin to see that the village depends on her in a way it refuses to admit aloud. They talk about weather and firewood and grain stores. But the true tension lives elsewhere, in cradles, in thin blankets, in the way mothers stare too long at sleeping faces, listening for breath. The midwife never promises. She never gives speeches about fate or mercy. She simply shows up. And in a world where so much feels random, showing up becomes its own kind of power. One night, you follow her to a house where the shutters are sealed tight, not only against cold, but against sound. Inside, the air is heavy with smoke and stale herbs. A candle burns low. The mother lies on a pallet, lips pale, hands gripping cloth hard enough to leave marks. The room is crowded, but quiet. Too quiet. It is the quiet of people who are afraid that speaking will break something. The midwife moves with her usual calm, but you notice how she pauses at the doorway longer than normal. Just a breath, just enough for you to feel it. She is listening, not with her ears, but with her body. She steps inside, and the house seems to adjust around her. The birth begins. Hours pass. The fire sinks lower. The room grows colder. Someone adds a log, and it crackles sharply, loud in the silence. The mother's breathing becomes uneven, then ragged, then controlled again. The midwife speaks only when necessary, and when she does, her voice is not soothing. It is practical. Instructions, rhythm. Simple phrases the body can follow when the mind is too frightened to lead. When the child finally arrives, there is that familiar suspended moment, the pause before sound, the village's oldest fear condensed into a single heartbeat. Then the cry comes. Thin, but present. The room loosens all at once, as if everyone has been holding their shoulders up all night and only now allows them to drop. The midwife does not smile. She nods once, as if acknowledging a task completed, nothing more. She cleans her hands, wraps the child, and then, as always, closes the door behind her. This time, you hear something different, not a voice, not words, just a small sound, like a strained breath pulled through teeth, a sound of effort. Minutes pass, more than minutes. The air outside that closed room feels heavy. The family waits in silence because they have been trained by custom and fear not to interrupt. The midwife has made the ritual uninterruptible. If the door is shut, you wait, even if your mind screams questions. The door opens. The midwife steps out with the child wrapped tightly. The baby's face is red, its breath steady. The mother's sister reaches forward, hands trembling, to take the bundle. The midwife does not release it immediately. She holds it for one extra heartbeat, looking down as if making sure the world has truly returned to normal. Then she lets go. Her fingers linger on the cloth after the child leaves her hands. And you notice the faint tremor there? Small, controlled, but real. On the walk back, the wind bites harder than usual. The midwife keeps her head down, pushing through the snow, as if speed can make the cold less meaningful. Halfway home, she stops, not dramatically, not collapsing, just stopping, as if her body has finally presented a bill she can no longer ignore. She leans one hand against a stone wall and breathes, slow and careful. Her other hand presses briefly against her ribs, not in pain exactly, but in warning. She does not look at you. She does not invite concern. After a moment, she straightens and starts walking again. You shouldn't be out every night, you say quietly. She gives a small sound that could almost be a laugh, except there is no humor in it. And yet, she replies, "You understand what she means. If she doesn't go, no one else can. Not really. Not in the way the village believes. They will fetch another woman with warm hands and good intentions. But good intentions are not the same as knowledge. And knowledge is not the same as the thing she carries in silence." Back at the cottage, she removes her cloak slowly, as if the fabric is heavier than it used to be. She sits by the hearth and holds her hands near the warmth without moving. You watch her fingers. The joints look slightly swollen. The skin is dry, cracked at the knuckles. Hands like hers are not meant to rest. They are meant to work until they fail. She reaches for the jar and stops. Not because she forgot it, because she is thinking. The jar sits on the shelf like a small, ordinary thing. but it contains the village's most fragile hope. For weeks now, you have watched her guard it, protect it, refuse to share it, and you have understood why. But tonight, you see something new in her expression, something that looks like a question asked privately, not, "Should I teach it?" She has already answered that. The question is something else. How do I end this? The medieval world is full of endings that pretend to be accidents. People die in barns, in fields, on roads, in beds that are too cold to be kind. Villages adapt. They mourn quickly because survival requires it. But the midwife's work is not only her job, it is a pattern. And patterns cannot stop without leaving a gap that everyone feels, even if they refuse to name it. She picks up the jar at last, turns it in her hands, and listens to it the way someone might listen to a closed door. Then she sets it down again and covers it with cloth, carefully, precisely, folding the fabric as if she is sealing something sacred. You're thinking about the last winter, you say. She does not deny it. She stares into the fire, as if the flames are writing something she can read. My grandmother, she says softly, told me there are two kinds of secrets. You wait. The first kind is kept because it protects the world from you. She pauses, letting the words settle. The second kind is kept because it protects you from the world. You feel the truth of it like cold water. The jar is not only a remedy, it is a boundary, a line drawn between a woman and everything that would want to claim what she knows. Twist it into proof. Turn it into rumor. Drag it into judgment. The secret has kept her safe as much as it has kept the children alive. But safety is never permanent. Not for women like her. Not for anyone. Over the following days, you notice changes. Small, almost invisible, but consistent. She moves slower. She sits more often. When she stands, she does it in stages, as if her body negotiates each movement. She does not speak of it. She does not ask for help. She simply continues. The village does not see it at first, because villagers see what they need to see. They need her to be unbreakable, so they treat her like she is. They keep knocking. They keep asking. They keep handing her their fear and expecting her to hold it without spilling. And she does. Until one evening, when a girl arrives at the door alone, cheeks raw from cold, eyes wide with urgency. No words at first, just breath, fast and thin. The girl points down the path, toward the far edge of the village, where the poorest houses cling to the wind. The midwife closes her eyes for a moment. Then she reaches for her cloak. You catch the jar before she does and hold it out. Ready. She hesitates. It is the smallest hesitation you have ever seen from her. And in that hesitation, you see the cost. Finally, she takes it. Outside, the snow has begun again. A steady fall that erases tracks almost as quickly as they are made. The sky is low, pressing down like a lid. The midwife steps into it as if stepping into water, pushing forward, head down, shoulders squared, halfway there. She says something you have never heard her say before. Listen, she says. You listen. At first, you hear only wind. Then, faintly, you hear it, the distant sound of a church bell. not the full ringing, just one slow toll, as if someone is testing the rope, a signal. In winter, bells mean many things: a death, a warning, a call for help. The midwife's pace quickens, and you realize, with a quiet certainty that settles in your stomach, that this night will not be like the others, not because the ritual will fail, but because the woman performing it is finally approaching the edge of what her body can give. The village will still knock. The fear will still arrive at her door. The children will still need whatever she carries in that jar. But there is a limit, and you are close enough now to feel it. Snow thickens around you. The bell tolls again, faint and slow. The midwife does not look back. She keeps walking, and the jar, wrapped in cloth, knocks gently against her ribs with each step, like a quiet reminder that nothing, no matter how sacred, can outlast the hands that hold it. Winter does not announce itself as the last. It arrives the same way all the others have, quietly, persistently, without ceremony. Snow gathers in corners. Ice seals shallow water. Breath becomes visible again. The village adjusts its habits, its expectations, its hours of light. And the midwife continues. Night after night, the knocks come. Sometimes soft, apologetic. Sometimes urgent, almost desperate. She answers them all. Her routine no longer changes at all now. Cloak, pouch, jar checked by touch, never by sight. The door closing behind her with that familiar sound of finality. You follow when you are needed. Other nights, she goes alone. You learn to recognize her steps fading into the dark. Steady, but slower than they once were. The village does not comment on this. People rarely comment on decline while it is happening. They notice it only afterward. The births blur together. A small house near the well, a crowded room near the fields, a cottage with a hearth too weak to warm even one corner properly. Different women, different fears, different labors, but always the same ending. A child breathing, a door closed, a ritual completed in silence. You begin to feel the sameness yourself. The repetition smooths your thoughts, dulls sharp edges. Each night follows the one before it so closely that memory starts to fold in on itself. You are no longer certain which child cried louder, which house smelled of smoke, which mother slept afterward, and which lay awake staring at the ceiling. It no longer matters. What matters is that the sequence holds. The midwife speaks less now. When she does, her words are brief, functional. She saves breath. She saves strength. When she sits fully, as if standing again will require negotiation. When she rises, she does it slowly, carefully, honoring the limits of her body without admitting them aloud. One night, you notice she leaves the jar on the table longer than usual before returning it to the shelf. Her fingers rest on it, unmoving. For a moment, you think she might open it again, check its contents, confirm something. She does not. She wraps it and sets it back where it belongs. The jar is almost empty now. Not gone, just thin, scraped carefully, used sparingly, stretched as far as discipline allows. Whatever mixture once filled it fully has already done most of its work. The remainder is reserved for necessity alone. Another night passes, then another. The snow deepens, roads narrow. People stop traveling unless they must. The midwife still goes out. Each journey takes more from her than the last. You see it in the way she pauses at thresholds, gathering herself, in the way her breathing takes longer to settle after walks through the cold. At one house, the birth ends quickly, almost easily. The relief in the room is immediate, uncomplicated. The midwife closes the door behind her and performs the ritual as she always has. When she returns, her face is calm, but as she lowers herself onto the bench, she stays there longer than necessary, eyes closed, hands resting in her lap. No one comments. No one thanks her excessively. The village has learned, instinctively, that gratitude can become pressure. As the season grinds on, the nights shorten slightly, though the cold does not release its grip. Children born earlier in the winter are still alive. People begin to speak of this with cautious satisfaction, not celebration, just acknowledgement. The midwife hears it and says nothing. One evening, there is no knock. You wait. She waits. The fire burns low. Outside, snow drifts lazily through the air, unhurried. The silence feels unfamiliar, almost unsettling. The midwife does not fill it with movement. She sits, hands folded, listening to the house breathe around her. Later that night, there is a knock, after all, softer than usual, hesitant. The midwife stands, slower than you have ever seen her move. She reaches for the jar, then stops. For a long moment, she simply stands there, breathing. You see the calculation pass through her, the assessment, the quiet question of whether her body can complete one more cycle. She picks up the jar. The walk is short, but the cold is sharp. Her steps are careful. When you arrive, the house is quiet, nearly dark. Inside, the labor is already advanced. There is no room for delay. The midwife takes control immediately. Her voice steady, her hands sure, despite their stiffness. The child arrives before dawn. The ritual is completed. But when the midwife emerges from behind the closed door, something is different. She does not carry the jar back to the table. She sets it down where she stands and looks at it for a long time, as if confirming what she already knows. There is almost nothing left. On the way home, she does not speak. Back in the cottage, she wraps the jar carefully, more carefully than ever before, and places it on the shelf. She does not check the seal afterward. She does not need to. That was the last, she says, not dramatically, not sadly, just fact. You do not ask whether she means the last of the mixture or the last of the work. The distinction no longer matters. The days that follow are quiet. No knocks come at night. Whether by chance or timing, the village seems to hold its breath with her. The midwife sleeps more, eats less, moves Only when necessary, she does not prepare the jar again. It remains untouched on the shelf. Winter begins, almost imperceptibly, to loosen. Snow melts at the edges. Paths reappear. Roofs drip steadily in the daylight. The village exhales and turns its attention back to survival of a different kind. One morning, you wake to a stillness that feels complete. Not ominous, not heavy. Simply finished. The midwife's door remains closed. No one knocks. No one calls out. By midday, someone notices. By evening, the village understands. The house is opened quietly. There is no alarm, no rush, just the soft, practical movements of people who know what endings look like. The jar remains on the shelf, sealed, untouched. In the weeks that follow, life continues. Another woman takes up the work, less precise, less disciplined, well-meaning and earnest. Births happen. Some children live, some do not. The village adjusts its expectations again. No one speaks of the ritual. No one mentions the jar. But occasionally, when winter returns, someone will remember. Remember that there was a time when more children survived than seemed reasonable, when nights ended more often in quiet breathing than in mourning. They do not name the reason. They do not look for proof. They let the memory remain what it is, a sense of order that once existed and then passed, intact, because it was never explained. And somewhere in a small cottage that no longer belongs to anyone in particular, a shelf still holds an ordinary jar, wrapped in cloth, containing almost nothing at all, which is exactly how it was meant to end. Spring arrives without asking permission. It does not announce itself any more than winter did. The ground softens first. Then the air. Snow retreats into shadows. Water begins to move again. The village adjusts the way it always has, shifting its weight from one season to the next. The midwife's cottage remains closed, not abandoned, just finished. People pass it on their way to fields, to the well, to the church. At first they look, then gradually they stop. The house becomes part of the background, like an old tree or a stone wall, something that exists without requiring attention. Inside, the shelf still holds the jar. Dust gathers slowly, not enough to obscure it, just enough to mark time. The cloth remains folded, undisturbed. No one touches it, not because they are afraid, but because they understand, instinctively, that touching it would change something they cannot afford to name. Life continues. Children born in early spring cry loudly, demand warmth, demand milk. Mothers learn new rhythms. The new midwife does her best. She works carefully, earnestly, using what she knows and what she has been taught. The village does not compare them aloud. Comparison belongs to the past. Occasionally, someone remembers a winter when fewer small graves appeared at the edge of the churchyard. The thought passes through them quietly, without bitterness. Memory does not insist on explanations. It only insists on being felt. Years later, someone cleans the cottage, not to claim it, not to reuse it, just to prevent collapse. They sweep the floor. They open the shutters. They let light in where light has not been in a long time. The shelf is still there. The jar still rests on it. The person who finds it lifts it once, curious, then sets it back. It feels light, nearly empty. Whatever it once held has already done its work. There is no smell left strong enough to identify, no residue that invites investigation. Just absence, and absence here is not a failure. In medieval villages, not everything is meant to endure. Some things are designed to exist only as long as they are needed. When they end, they do not leave instructions behind. The knowledge that survived did so by passing from hand to hand. The knowledge that did not was not lost. It was completed. On cold nights, long after the cottage has faded into disuse, people still warm newborns' feet without knowing why. They do it instinctively, repeating gestures stripped of their origin, not because it works the same way, but because bodies remember patterns even when minds forget reasons. The jar stays where it is. No one opens it again. And somewhere beneath layers of time, beneath stories that no longer have names attached to them, the ritual remains exactly what it always was, a quiet act performed in the dark, without witnesses, without explanation, meant only to give life a better chance to hold on. You do not dream of it. You simply rest. Breathing slows. The season turns. And the story ends not with a final moment, but with continuity, with the understanding that some things are not meant to be carried forward, only to be done carefully until they no longer need to be done at all. The house stays silent, the jar stays closed, and sleep comes easily now because nothing else is required.